everyone, my name is Marsha Azara binti Shahrim and I'm from T06. For today's video, my group will be presenting on conflicts. So, what is conflicts in literature? Simply put, the conflict of a book is a struggle between two opposing forces. So, conflicts start when something stands in the way of a character and their goals. In the other words, character plus what does it want plus obstacles, so it becomes conflicts. So, I will start my talk with explaining what is character versus nature. Basically, character versus nature is when a character faces resistance from a natural force. It can mean the weather, wilderness, or natural disaster. So, in this story, we can see from chapter 2, the animals had successfully chased out Jones and his men out through their rebellion plan. And then in this chapter 6, we can see when Napoleon, the protagonist, trying to exert dominance through over the nature by asking other animals to work hard to rebuild the windmill which was ruined by a storm. And Napoleon asked the animals to work hard through the winter. So after when the food went scarce, then Napoleon started to ration their food. So the animals were near to starvation. Now I'm going to explain on character versus self. So it takes place inside a character's minds, where it usually involves the character's inner thoughts, struggling with self-doubt, a moral dilemma, and their own nature. So in this chapter 5, we can see that Squealer explains something different, but it was unanswerable by the other animals. It is because the animals were in doubts trying to figure out what to believe in Napoleon. However, Boxer the horse had spoken out. He said that when the Napoleon said something, it was always right. It is because Napoleon also abused the animals mentally. So this happened when Napoleon's trying to tell them things and convincing them to believe in whatever he says. And all that year, the animals work like slaves, but they feel happy and they don't feel anything about it because they think that they did was just for their own benefits. And it was because Napoleon had trained them to believe like that. Next, I will pass this to my friend.
Hi and greetings everyone, my name is Maya and I am from Group 5. So today I will be presenting to you the conflicts between character and society. So which is the animal versus farmers? So first, I'm going to tell you the furthermore about the before animals rebellion. The conflict happens here. So in chapter 2, page 12, the animals get fed up with their master, which is Farmer Jones. So they kick him out. This happened on one evening when Jones and his men forgot to feed the animals. One of the calves broke into the store shed with her horns, and the other animals are helping themselves to get some food. In a few moments after Mr. Jones woke up, he and his men were already in the store shed with the whips lashing around. This was so much too bad for the animals that were already starving. Suddenly, Mr. Jones and his men got butted and kicked from all directions from the animals. This situation frightened them as they never seen the animals behave like that. So they give up defending themselves and tried to escape. This is where the animals chased them out from the farm. The rebellion had been successfully carried. Jones got kicked out and the men of the farm was theirs. So after the animals rebellion, once they are free of the tyrant Jones, life on the farm is good for a while, and there is hope for a happy future or less work, better education, and more food. So the next is after the animals rebellion. After the animals rebellion, there is a conflict happen, which is when the animals bravely fight off a human attempt to retake the farm. This become known as the Battle of the Cowshed. Uh, this can be seen in chapter 4, which when Mr. Jones and all his men enter the gates of the animal farm with the intention of retake the farm. Snowball had anticipated an attack and created an elaborate plan to defend the farm after studying a book on Julius Caesar's campaign. So Snowball launches his first attack by sending pigeons and geese to pack the men, and then he launched a second attack alongside Muriel, Benjamin, and all the sheep before they quickly retreating. So when they are retreating, Jones and his men proceed to follow the animals, where they were suddenly ambushed by 3 horses, 3 cows, and the rest of the pigs. This is where the animals viciously attack the men, and Snowball also demonstrate bravery by attacking Jones after being shot, and the humans eventually sprint from the farm as the animals chase them out. Within 5 minutes of the invasion, the battle is over and the animals retain control of the farm. So the next conflict is after the animal rebellions in chapter 8. After 2 years, after the 2 years, the animals have completed a windmill. So Napoleon accepted a deal with Frederick and sold timber for £5. But in return, he discovered the notes were counterfeit. So he immediately ordered a death sentence on Frederick. And in the very next morning, where the animals had their breakfast, Frederick and his men arrived with the intent to attack and gain control of the title deeds of Animal Farm. The animals realized that they couldn't win like they did at the Battle of the Cowshed. So there were more men, because there were more men and 6 of them had firearms. So Napoleon expected Pilkington would come help, but his pigeons delivered a message from Pilkington saying, "Serve you right." So this is where it proven that Mr. Frederick and Mr. Pilkington had enough of the animals. So when the animals were all frightened, Napoleon and Boxer were unable to rally the others. So Mr. Frederick and his men take the opportunities to blow out the windmill, and Napoleon unleashed his corps of attack dogs. After their attack, the men retreated. However, it came at great cost, even though they gained victory at the end.
Part of our presentation today, I'll be talking about conflicts of idea. The conflicts of idea between Snowball versus Napoleon. The idea that Napoleon has versus the idea that Napoleon has. I'll also be talking about man versus man. The power struggle between Napoleon versus Snowball. So first, let's start on conflicts of idea. Snowball versus Napoleon. The idea that Snowball has versus the idea that Napoleon has. Snowball and Napoleon have contradictory ideas. Snowballs want pure communism where everyone benefits equally. Napoleon, on the other hand, prefers power. He prefers dictatorship. Conflicts of idea between Napoleon and Snowball represents the struggle between the idea of communism and its implementation. Snowball thinks that it is very important for them to educate everyone through various committees that he had established. To put it in simpler words, Snowball is more of a communist leader where he views everyone as equal. From the novel, there's a conflict where Snowball emphasizes on the importance of education for everyone. Napoleon, on the other hand, took no interest in Snowball's committee and insists that education of the young was more important. With that as a reason, Napoleon took the puppies to breed them as vicious dogs later on so that he could fulfill his own vendetta in the future. Snowball always thought that by taking the people's side, they would do well under his leadership, and he always thinks ahead of time, while Napoleon simply uses brute force and manipulation to make sure that the people adhere to his order. Here we can see the conflicts of idea between Snowball and Napoleon. Here, Snowball leads by thinking about the progress of Animal Farm in the future and by taking the people's side. However, with Napoleon, obviously, we can see that he leads using force and manipulation. Napoleon is the definition of how the implementation of the idea of animalism or communism fails when Napoleon is being selfish and put his own personal vendetta first instead of treating everyone equally. And this makes Napoleon a dictator. In conclusion, Snowball wants to lead with the idea of communism, while Napoleon wants to lead with the idea of dictatorship. So, moving on, man versus man, Napoleon versus Snowball. We're going to talk about the conflict that happened between the both of them. The conflict between Snowball and Napoleon is one of man versus man because it is mostly a power struggle between the two of them. As we can see from my explanation of conflicts of idea between Napoleon and Snowball, both pigs have different ideals and use the rebellion for different purposes. Snowballs fight for the principle of animalism, where Napoleon uses those same principles to further his own cause. Instead, the two animals standing together to improve conditions for all animals. Their power struggle causes confusion and the ultimate removal of Snowball. In chapter 5, the conflicts represent real people in the Russian Revolution. Leon Trotsky, a leader of the Bolshevik Revolution, an early architect of the Soviet state, is deported by Soviet leader Joseph Stalin to Alma-Ata in remote Soviet Central Asia, where he lived there in external exile for a year before being banished from the Soviet state forever by Stalin. Just as we can see here, just like how Napoleon chased Snowball away from Animal Farm. However, Snowball will forever leave an impact with his idea of animalism and the original Seven Commandments, despite of their struggle and despite Snowball is inevitably is chased away by Napoleon. But his idea of animalism and the original Commandment will forever leave an impact. Just like Leon Trotsky, his idea of extreme radicalism and the call for continuing world revolution that would inevitably result in the dismantling of the Soviet state. Obviously, the impact of conflict between Napoleon and Snowball leaves an impact that is so big that it eventually leads to other conflicts in the story. So that sums up conflicts in Animal Farm, and that is all from us. And thank you.